Let me go ahead and turn it over to Richard Foltak. He is from Dido, and he is the SVP CISO Head of Cloud. Today, he's going to speak on Beyond LLM, Cybersecurity, and the era of Agentic AI. So let's welcome Richard, who's right behind me.
Thank you so much. 2 years ago, I had the honor of actually coming to Atlanta and doing a presentation on large language models and securing that. It wasn't just a fad, and it's not just being used by your kids to cheat on their homework or do their papers out there. It's being widely integrated and used whether you like it or not. And this is the problem with technology. Useful technology that helps cut the clutter and make life more convenient tends to be used whether it's authorized or not. And that was sort of the presentation I did 2 years ago in terms of understanding the risk to your organization in terms of unauthorized use of some technologies like large language models. So really encouraging organizations to take that seriously and actually start embracing it and putting the right guardrails around that. But 2 years has basically moved on since then. And we got a few things to talk about. In the past, we used to look at large language models where it was just you interacting with an AI and getting something out of it. But today, the world has changed drastically. AI is not, and the large language models are not just, I'm having a conversation with this thing. It's gone way beyond that. And really what's happening from an organizational perspective, and I see this with boards of directors that are trying to change the way an organization works. And 10 years ago, I make this analogy, I worked at that was at Deloitte. I was chief architect. I was talking to a lot of C-levels, and they're telling me right off the bat, my board of directors is asking me, what is my cloud strategy? And the way it worked is if you didn't have a cloud strategy, you were fired. You were replaced by somebody who knew what they were doing. 5 years ago, that conversation was around ESG. I'm not going to get into that. That's not this. That gets more political. But recently, it's all about your AI strategy. And it's coming. Whether you like it or not, AI is being integrated into the core of your process and how your people, your process, your structure, and your technology is being ingrained into your environment. Now, what I want to highlight is that the reason for the AI will vary. Sometimes it actually is helpful, but some organizations look at this as a way of cost savings, is looking at replacing humans. I'm not a fan of that. I'm just going to throw that out there. But I wanted to highlight the fact that the way organizational goals get to organizational outcomes is changing. And the leaders in this room should understand what does that mean for them, especially from a security perspective. So agentic automation is really where I'm getting at, is this idea that AI is now replacing RPA. And I'm not sure if everyone here is aware of what RPA is. They called it, basically, it was the way of creating robotic procedure automation. You took an activity, you took a workflow, and you automated every step. And that might be, go to this spreadsheet, pull out this value, put it in here. The reality is a lot of this stuff is now being done by an AI that may be on your computer, it may be on a server, and you're being told, I want to take these steps. I close every month I close the books, I do this, I go follow the step. An AI can follow exactly what you did and repeat that process. And not just repeat it in a way that you did it, but look at it from an intent perspective. What did I intend to get to? So it's not exactly that cell, it's the field that tells me the net income, the net that. And I just want to highlight the fact that AIs can actually think. And what's happening now is that the AI and AI agents are becoming part of the overall process. They're taking up activities and tasks that we have traditionally done ourselves in our environment. Now, the reality is it's really empowering a lot of us. It's allowing us to declutter our toil, the stuff we don't like doing, but we have to do every single day. And it's allowing to replace that activity, and it can do it on our behalf. But I wanted to highlight the fact that to every positive, there is a negative, the yin and the yang of this particular situation. And as the executives and the people focused on security, you need to understand risk. I think everyone understands the reward to an organization that's possible, but as security leaders, your job is to mitigate that risk in a manner that is acceptable to get the organizational outcomes. And if you don't bring it up and if you don't make that as part of your conversation, you will be excluded. I see a lot of security folks get thrown at the end of a conversation. It's like, hey, we decided to build this app or this tool, and now just patch on some security on top of it and everything will work. We all know that doesn't work. That strategy is a strategy for failure, and it's why it's important for everybody in the security world to understand what is the state of the art today, how it's being integrated, and how you as leaders should, develop your practices. CISO's jobs and the security team's jobs are actually getting more important in an AI world than ever before. So really kind of focus on what's happened in the last 2 years, right? We went from a world of a handful of large language models like OpenAI, now you got Gemini, you got Grok, you got Claude, Sonnet. Then you got the DeepSeek ones, the Chinese ones that are out there. Everybody's got AIs and they'll answer all your questions and, they'll help most of the time. And the analogy I like to use with LLMs and anybody who's actually have experience with them, it's like having a 5-year-old child with an IQ of 1,000. Absolutely brilliant, smart, but will lie to you in a heartbeat if to please you. And this is important because they will lie. There was a study done that in the journal JAMA, it's the Journal of American Medical Research, 85% of all research papers in the last 3 years were AI generated. I'm not saying humans didn't add stuff, but they had research links that never existed. They had recitations to stuff that was complete bogus crap, and people just took it and accepted it as being fact. There's actually been AIs used in law cases where they cited case numbers and cases as, because again, this is common law, and the way it works is that if there was a precedent in a case, then the judge has to take it as consideration. The AI lied. It made stuff up so that you can win your case. That's still there. Now, I will tell you that things have changed. This idea of co-pilots, task-based assistants, what it really focuses on is I have programmed an LLM to be really good at one task. And that idea is I need something to help me program my language. So they had built AIs that help build you Python code or something to that effect. And so these co-pilots have become very functional, and they're being used by your people in your organization, whether you know it or not. Code is being generated. There's a whole practice called Vibe. People are writing code using AI and just telling them, I want you to write me a function that does X, this, that, whatever, or build me a system. People can put up entire websites and entire games can be built without even knowing how to program. This is where the state of the art is. Now, is it going to be a good program? I can't tell you. Just saying the AI can generate working code and it will be functional, and it definitely helps actual practitioners whip out code quickly and get 80 to 90% of the work done immediately. RAG is a new concept because what was happening is AI started hallucinating. And what does that mean is they started making stuff up. And what ended up happening is they're saying, hey, we're going to create some grounding. What does grounding mean? It's like, I'm going to tell you some data, some information that is useful for you, and I'm going to put it in some document and you're going to read it, and that's where you should be citing information most often. This is useful for help desks, support desks. Why? Because all your websites are read through and you have a little chatbot that says, hey, I want to know something, and it will actually answer based on what's on your website. So it's not making stuff up. It's going to its grounding. It's picking the stuff up. So this has helped tremendously over the years in terms of AIs not doing their 5-year-old temper tantrum. But what's happened recently is agents. And it's this idea that I'm going to build an AI that is tailored for one task. And it might just be my calendar app, my agent that will book me my travel reservations. And these types of agents, because they're contextualized, you're drawing them down into something very small in terms of what they're supposed to do. They're not making stuff up as much. And as a consequence of that, they've built systems where you now have 100 agents all with different tasks, all coordinating amongst themselves and doing activities end to end with processes that may follow a predefined process that you've put in a RAG and saying, this is the process we follow in our organization, please follow that as much as possible. And it will develop the entire process end to end to get tasks done on your behalf. Now, this is kind of scary because now you're making agents do stuff, not just write a document. They're going to book appointments on your behalf. They're going to delete records in your database. They're going to do activities that traditionally there was a human behind the loop making those particular tasks. And there are horror stories on AIs going rogue, doing things where they deleted a record, realized that what they did was wrong, and then went off and said, oops, I deleted the entire database of your customers in your last 5 years of data. And you can look through it. There's records of this all over the place. Want to highlight this because it's kind of important. Because you, as the CISOs, as the security folks, if you do not have a business continuity plan, if you do not have backups, if you do not have proper controls in your environment, you are screwed. That is my technical evaluation. You don't need a hacker to come into your environment. You guys will kill yourselves. Just right off the bat. So to all of you guys wanting budget for protecting yourselves, as AI moves fast, you better be able to protect yourself in case of things going wrong. So really highlight the fact that, AI agents are force multipliers. They allow you to achieve things you may not even known was possible in the past, and they will help. You can ask it questions in English, and it will figure out how to do something. And as long as it has access to that data and contextually understands this data together, it will allow you to do things you probably have never been able to done before. Google did a recent study, and they kind of came up with the fact that about 28%, now that might not seem large, but 28% of organizations that have embraced AI are having exceptionally amazing outcomes. Now, that also means 72% of them have either meh or below, but the reality is this is being embraced. Companies are becoming very successful, and in many cases, it's becoming a competitive advantage for organizations. There are now what they refer to A to A, agent to agent. Basically, it is a protocol for agents to talk amongst themselves. You have the ability of, the use cases in terms of financial, looking over your data and looking for anomalies in your data. Triaging, security operations. This is something we at Dido have. If you come to our booth, we can talk about MCP servers and actually having agents act as your tier 1, tier 2 analysts. They'll go out there, pull in all of the threat intel, everything else associated to every alert, and give you a summary of what's happening in the environment, allowing you to eliminate a lot of toil that your employees are dealing with. Focus on decision-making for the human in the loop, not the gathering of data, the summarization of the data. This is proving to be very effective in the field. And a human can quickly identify when there's a hallucination in the results. So that's why it's kind of important to have that human in the loop. But we're seeing 30 to 60% immediate improvements in operational efficiencies. This means you can do a lot more with fewer people. Doesn't mean you lay people off, but it means you can get a lot more done. And there's also a technology called an MCP, which is a Model Context Protocol server. And again, this is a way of engaging with agents and engaging in the human language to deal with your business and operational problems in a way that has not happened in the past. So I want to highlight this one thing, though, that agents aren't code in the traditional sense. They understand context, they understand memory of what's happened in the past, and they use tools on your behalf. And the thing is, they're goal-oriented. You tell them an objective, and that's what they focus on. You don't tell them how to do it. You can give them a guideline in terms of the RAG, but it doesn't mean that's the way it's going to go. But the key is they can act. They can make changes to your system. And we all hear horror stories of when AIs make changes that weren't quite what you wanted to do. Back to make sure the risk associated to this is well understood. And I really want to highlight this because agentic automation is beyond just RPA. RPA, and if you're an investor in Blue Prism, and I'm just saying they're going to be eaten alive quite soon, in my opinion, with the use of agentic AI as solutions, because they're going way beyond just following the step-by-step aspect. You give them a goal, they will figure it out, and they'll do it on your behalf, which means you're not just automating what you're currently doing, you can now create automations that you want to do pretty intelligently and without having to tell it how to do this. So, wanted to just really highlight the fact that these platforms exist. They're evolving very quickly. Most of them are open source. They're almost free. This technology is being embraced. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that, the technology is there, the governance is not. This is why I'm reaching out and saying, folks, you are the voices of governance in this environment. You need to make sure you provide visibility into what the AIs are doing. Because now they're using protocols like A2A to talk amongst themselves. And what I'm really trying to highlight the fact is that you need to see what they're doing. That visibility, that monitoring of what they're doing is your key objective in the next few years. You cannot just allow Skynet to do its thing, okay? You need to know when two agents are talking amongst themselves if they're still following the context. Back to the 5-year-olds. You have a room of 100 5-year-old kids that are absolutely brilliant, that can do way beyond what they're doing. But you know what's the old rule if you have kids? When they're too quiet, it's time to be worrisome. Okay, this is what I'm trying to get at. You need to keep a camera. You got to need to know what they are doing. And so you've got to monitor your agent activity. But then there's something you guys also have to understand. There are two types of agents now. There are agents that are personal agents. Google has this tool called Agent Space that acts on your behalf. It will read your email. It will go through your calendar and say, hey, these are the top 5 emails you should be worried about this morning. And it will build the automations and will build out the workflows on your behalf. But guess what? It's acting as you. It's taking your identity and it's engaging with the world as you. Would you really like to be fired for something an AI did on your behalf that you never authorized, but you kind of authorized because you gave it that permission to do something? So just understand, as an executive, this is something you have to consider. And then there's obviously the traditional workflow that acts as a service account, an automation. But please be aware of that because they're taking on a person's identity and they're doing actions in your environment. How are you handling the access control around that? So all of your, like every company I deal with has IAM issues. Like every company, in terms of least privilege, dual controls, and so forth. This is taking it to an accelerated level. If you don't have that correctly set up in your organization, you're in trouble. Now, also auditing reasoning chains. You got to know how they're talking amongst themselves. You got to log this stuff. But here's the other aspects I'm just going to throw out there is that company was like letting their HR folks write and use AI, but that HR person that makes it, write me an email announcing a 50% layoff of my company or announcing earnings. Do you really want that type of stuff to show up on some, engineers who's monitoring and looking at your environment? But that's kind of, that visibility may be there. So you're going to have what can and cannot be shared. So maybe the idea of summarizing the email and saying this is highly sensitive and telling that these are sensitive prompts and responses and not to make that visible. But these are things you have to consider. But the one that really scares me is how do you audit reasoning chains? Because you ask an AI the same question 3 different times over 3 different months, you're going to have 3 different answers to how to solve a particular problem. You're going to have to, how do you audit that? How do you deal with the fact that the AI does not respond the same way it did a month ago? It does it a little differently. Well, as executives in security, we hate variance. Something's changed. How do you audit for that? The outcome may come out to be the same, but how you got there will change. Something you have to consider in how you handle that. And so I'm just wanting to kind of highlight this in terms of also responsibility. And there is a new thing. Software development life cycles are going away. We're going into a world of agentic development cycles. People aren't coding anymore. You're just telling it a task, what you're expecting at it, you're giving it a context, And the AI will do it on your behalf. It will, if it has to write a piece of code, it will do the code on your behalf. It will execute it. It will run it. Now, how do you test for that? The entire paradigm is changing. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to write a bunch of test scripts and run my scripts and, oh, they passed. Okay, so blue-green deployment, it's a go. It's changing. And now, highlighted the other aspect. Users can self-automate. You can build your own agents on behalf of you. Employees can build their own apps. The role of a software engineer is going away. There's not a need for as many of them as in the past. And it's really this idea of monitoring behavioral aspects in your environment. Not what someone can do, but like what are they doing and what is the type of behaviors in there. And it's really scary when you have hundreds of AI agents all talking amongst themselves. And you're going to have to, it's like HR. You have 100 employees, but in this case, they're 5-year-olds that are really, really smart and potentially up to some mischievous behavior. You don't know. How do you monitor for that? This is the problem from an oversight perspective you need to kind of consider. Now, thankfully, a lot of security companies are aware of this. They're knowing that this is a problem. There are technologies in terms of that visibility of what's happening is coming into the picture. But I am strongly recommending organizations answer these questions and ask, how are we monitoring for this? And how are we protecting? Are we creating daily backups? Are we doing this? Because if you're not, all of your cracks, as was the previous presentation, all of your bad practices will come back and bite you much harder. So wanted to really just kind of highlight the fact that these agents, they have access to your highly sensitive information. There's very little oversight. And if it's acting as an employee and not a service account, who do you fire when something goes wrong? Because I didn't do it. It was my AI. And I'm just saying, it's kind of something you have to keep in mind. And this is the leadership challenge that I'm throwing out to everybody here, is as a CIO, you need to define your architectural boundaries for your organization. And you have to, as a CISO, you need to define your baselines and your observability. In other words, nothing should happen in my environment if I can't see what's happening, or at least know summary. You can literally have an AI monitor what another AI is doing and summarize what it is and say, hey, this is secure, this is a sensitive information. I'm not going to share, but I can summarize that it's financial information, it's medical information, stuff I shouldn't share with humans. But dual controls work with AI agents. This is the crazy part. You can actually have two AIs, different LLMs, one monitors what the other one's doing. There's a little crazy aspect associated with that too, which I'll get to in a second. But the idea is that how you govern your data, how you share your data has to be very well understood in your organization. I know too many organizations that play fast and loose around their data, and it's going to get crazy if you don't protect it. Sorry, I saw someone about to take a picture, so I'm going to kind of come back. But I like governance is key, and I want to kind of highlight around that. But okay, so highlight the future's already here. So we at Dido, just FYI, we use MCP servers, we use agents to actually help protect or manage our security operations centers around Google. We go in and bring in all the data, summarize it all, and have the AI build a report within seconds of an alert telling our analyst what we believe is happening based on threat intel and everything else, and allows us to deal with incidents in near real time from a summarization perspective. We have not seen any cases of hallucinations, to be just totally blunt, saying we're getting good results out of this. But it's really important because rather than muting problems, we're addressing them up front. And I'm calling this out because one of our customers, large university in the West Coast, we were doing a SecOps enablement, a pilot across 3 other vendors. And the day after we got all the logs fed into the environment because they were evaluating versus Splunk, and they were like happy with the outcome, but they were like, hey, this is getting expensive, Cisco, whatever, right? The day after, we were getting red alerts around our environment. We identified that the North Koreans took over their DNS, and they muted it. We got a little thing, and it's like, this is not a little thing. Everything you've done has been compromised for X amount of time. They again, I'm not mentioning their name, but they've told us, like, for 3 weeks, their lawyer said, do not talk. They had to deal with the incident and deal with the legal ramifications associated with that incident. We're pointing out that AI can be a great helper because it avoids alert fatigue and people silencing systems that should have the thought thrown in and the investigation done, and not just quick, if you see this, ignore it. And it's really helping. And like I said, we help organizations optimize their security operations centers if they have one. So really summarizing, agents are here. You got to evolve. And really the governance and this ability of having explainability should be non-negotiable. Finally, all organizations are embracing agentic work. Again, I'm just saying, I'm seeing it at the executive level. It's being pushed down. You need to get involved in that conversation from day one, not to stop it. You're not going to get far. Anybody who knows how the last 10 years has been, CISOs who have been trying to stop organizational enhancements and evolution have been replaced by those who can essentially embrace this. So you have to be the voice of reason in these conversations, saying, let's do this, but let's do this smart. Let's make sure we have the budget to keep the backups, put in the right controls in place, look at AIs as 5-year-old employees that can do great things for us, but make sure we're doing this intelligently. And finally, I really want to highlight this, the human in the loop. Do not look at this as getting rid of all the people and AI is going to solve all the world. It's not. Have smart people monitoring and managing, and this should be your helper. I mean, this is the new world. People are losing jobs, but it's the people who can embrace the new technologies and help enable that into organizations that are going to stay on because, one, they have the scars, they have the memory, they understand the muscle memory of the organization, the culture of the organization, and they know how to make this happen. So my recommendation to all of you is, keep yourself educated in all of this. If you guys have any questions, just come by the booth. I know I'm holding you guys up for lunch, but are there any questions? In terms of, I have about 2 minutes, so if there's anybody who has anything to ask. Okay, so the question is Google the only cloud I'm working on? And the answer to that is no. So like Google SecOps works for on-prem. It's a SaaS-based solution, but with BindPlane, we feed all the logs to the system, and most of our customers are not Google customers who use it. And the reality is we're embracing, from an MCP perspective, all AIs. Why? Each AI is built a little differently. They have their own personality. One of our customers, they built a consensus network where they fed the same problem to Gemini, Sonnet, and OpenAI and said, okay, summarize, figure out what I need to do next, argue amongst yourselves and give me the answer. And what they told me was that Gemini usually gets it right, but Sonnet bullies Gemini into taking its opinion. And you will see this. If you have an argument with an LLM, it will say, oh, you're right, and like it tries to please. While another one may be a little bit more of an attitude and say, no, I'm right. And look, you're dealing with 5-year-olds. I'm not kidding, but they're smart and they can be very helpful. And I want to highlight the fact that you should look around and look at the various models because a lot of them are trained for specific use cases. So take advantage of that. And for security, I know that there's a new AI model that somebody built out. Add that to your portfolio. Go and have the MCP server says, go get their opinion on this situation. Bring it into the conversation because the analyst doesn't have to search for it. He can say, hey, I got 3 opinions. This is the summary of the 3. What should I do next? But if you can get that within 2 minutes of an attack and give you an entire response plan on how to deal with that attack, and then you've pulled in info from, really good sources out there, you've just made an organization's job a lot more secure. The reality is, if you do not have an incident response plan, if you do not know how to handle a particular attack, that time right there is critical for your ability to deal with situations. And having AIs help you with that is useful. Now, you still need to have a proper security person know whether an AI has gone rogue and okay, those recommendations are idiotic, throw it out. But that's why asking multiple AIs, figuring stuff out, a lot easier when you have a well-written, summarized report telling you what you're supposed to do 2 minutes after the fact. You're not panicking and be able to come up with an outcome. Hopefully that helps.